What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network, as well as on Vice, as today we're talking Season 2, Episode 9 of Dark Side of the Ring, entitled The Final Days of Owen Hart. Now, this was the Season 2 grand finale. The numbers of the episodes may be off for me. I think I saw on Wikipedia that they count the Benoit episode technically as 2 episodes, because like the first hour, then the second hour. So, you know, for some people, episode 9 might be, what was the last one? The Road Warriors episode. So don't take the numbers for what they are. That's just kind of what they are to me, because I kind of consider that Benoit episode to be one full 2-hour episode. It's not like it aired one week and then the next week. I know they put the preview up on YouTube, but to me, that's it's 2 episodes merged into one as a 2-hour show. Speaking of which, my biggest nitpick of this Owen Hart episode, while it was great overall, now I can't say it was like entertaining or enjoyable. It was really fucking depressing. There is almost no way you can get through this entire thing without almost coming close to shedding a tear. And I didn't even live through this. You know, I didn't become a wrestling fan until years later. Yet I kind of got teary-eyed watching this. Watching Jim Hart almost break down in tears got to me a little bit. Jim Ross as well. Everything that he had to say. The wife, Martha, the kids, everything else. But anyway, my biggest nitpick of the episode, I would say, was that it wasn't 2 hours. Now, Martha did a great interview on Talk Is Jericho a while ago, a few weeks ago, before the episode aired, talking about the case and countersuing WWE, or them countersuing her, rather. A lot of the stuff that they did not really, maybe they mentioned on the episode, but they did not go into great detail about at all. Like, they never mentioned on this episode why they were suing Martha. I mean, they mentioned the outcome, the $18 million settlement, I believe, but beyond that, there weren't a lot of great details as to, you know, the defense of the people who were behind the whole pulley thing and everything else. They mentioned them, but we didn't hear from those people specifically. I believe Bret Hart was asked to be a part of this, but he said no. Usually they say here on the special, we attempted to reach out for, to so-and-so for comment. They declined. We didn't get that with Bret Hart here, though I do believe he came out afterward on, some sort of social media platform, put out a statement saying, we really didn't have much to say about it. He's not on good terms with Martha. So I thought maybe he wasn't a part of it because Martha didn't want him a part of it. But it looks like he just chose not to participate. So anyway, other than that, I thought this was very good overall. It told me a lot I didn't know about the Owen Hart tragedy. And I knew a bit about it going in. I mean, again, I didn't live through it. But like I knew a lot about the Benoit tragedy, and even that kind of shined some light on some things that I was unfamiliar about going in, and this even did that, I would say, 10 times more than the Benoit episode did, because I was even less familiar with this than I was the Benoit stuff. So anyway, we kick off the episode here from narrator Chris Jericho, as always, and Jericho does these, I think it was this in the Benoit episode where he was actually on the show, but he also does the narration, which was interesting. So we hear him talking about how no wrestling family has ever compared to the Hart family, and how Owen Hart was the youngest of 12 siblings. Now, again, as the episode title suggests, it only really goes into good detail about his death, which is what this episode is all about. It would have been cool to hear about his backstory and what he did prior to WWE. They do get into that very briefly here, but again, this is largely all about the incident itself. But we hear from Jim Ross, who's all over this episode for, obvious reasons. He worked with Owen very closely, and they talk about how all of Stu Hart's sons wanted to follow in Stu's footsteps and become professional wrestlers, including Owen. Jim Cornette, who was on this episode as well, was very refreshing to not hear Jim Cornette go off on Vince Russo for once, which you would honestly expect, to be honest with you. If there's any episode for him to go off on Vince Russo, of all the episodes he's been on so far, you would think it would be this one, just because Vince Russo was allegedly, it was his idea to have Owen Hart up there, in the first place. They never mentioned that. I don't blame Vince Russo for it. I'm sure he had something to do with it, but we don't hear from him here. They don't even bring that, part of the story up. But he did. If he did mention that, they cut it out, because I don't remember him mentioning Vince Russo even once on this episode, which was, again, somewhat refreshing, as entertaining as some of his rants can be on Vince Russo from time to time. But he called Owen Hart a tragedy, and we hear from Jericho himself out of narrator form when he said that Owen Hart influenced them very heavily coming up in the business. Jim Ross said that he thought that he was as good as anyone in the territory when he first saw him. I forgot what that would have been. I don't know if it would have been WWE or elsewhere, but he thought he was absolutely incredible. So we then hear from Martha Hart, his widow, who is now a doctor and a mom, among other things, in charge of the Owen Hart Foundation, which I'll get to momentarily, at the end of the episode, that is. She said that she started dating Owen around the time that she was 15 years old, so they knew each other for a long time. I'm not sure how much older he was than her, probably not that much older if she was 15, but they were pretty much, it sounded like high school sweethearts. I'm not sure if they went to the same high school, but that's a long time. But she called him a gentle giant, and that he didn't feed off the fame. He just wanted a normal life. He loved being a dad. He was a great professional wrestler, but even more importantly, he was an even better dad. And Oj loved his childhood. That is the son of Owen Hart. We hear from Athena as well. She said she was 3, I believe, when he died, but she has very few memories of her father. But she loved going to the zoo with him. That was like the one memory that she still has of him to this day. I'm not sure what the origin of the Athena name is, but I know Oj. They didn't mention this here, I don't think, but Martha did say this on the Talk is Jericho podcast a while ago when she said that the origin of the Oj name, like why is he named Oj, it's just a random name, she used to call Owen, I forgot what his middle name was, but his initials were OJ. So instead of calling him OJ, she would call him Oj. So out of that, she called their son Oj. Because she would call, it was a little confusing, I'm sure, while he was still alive, but they named their son Oj after Owen Hart. So that's where it comes from. It's not OJ with an E or like OG or whatever. It's Oj. That's how you pronounce it. Anyway, so we hear from Owen, not only from Martha, but we hear from Owen himself. They have a lot of great home video, which is why I'm so happy they were able to get Martha on this episode. And she's talked about it before. The producers have talked about it before, where they had to, in order to reach out to Martha and to get her to be a part of this project, they had to answer a bunch of questions that Martha came up with herself, and they answered everything exactly as she would want them to be answered, which is what enticed her about the project. Like, it wasn't a slam piece, and I guess it kind of is of WWE, but it allowed her to tell her story, and for so many years there was this perception, and kind of still is among some fans, which I'll get to, about how evil she is. She's not allowing Owen Hart to go into the Hall of Fame, which I never thought she was evil. I never really knew anything about the woman. But after hearing her side of the story on the podcast and here, I completely understand where she's coming from. I'm honestly kind of surprised. I never really thought about this before, but it was the company that killed her husband. Not intentionally, but out of neglect. For all the shit they were doing with the pulley and the wire and everything else. Like, I do not blame her whatsoever, which I'll get to again at the end. There's still that contingent of fans that will blame her for not him being in the Hall of Fame. Who gives a fuck? It's a fucking Hall of Fame. Like, I like the Hall of Fame, don't get me wrong. It means something to a lot of people, but in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't mean that much to put aside all this bad blood just for him to be. It's not even a real Hall of Fame, as she said. There's no actual legitimate Hall of Fame. He's in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, I believe. I think that was up here in Amsterdam, New York, but was later moved to, I think, Dallas or somewhere in Texas a couple of years ago. I think that's the Hall of Fame that he was inducted in not too long ago. But he says on home video that he wanted to get out of the business early, save up enough money where he can retire, just enjoy the rest of his life. He had no intentions of continuing to wrestle when he was 45 or 50. Like, he wanted to get out and stay out. And he started at the age of 23, and he was good even then. He didn't have an over-the-top personality they talked about, and that was why he started as the Blue Blazer, to kind of give him personality. Now, this was before WWE. They brought back the Blue Blazer gimmick when he died, like right before he passed away in WWE. But he started that gimmick, I believe, elsewhere, maybe in a Canadian territory. I forgot where they said that it was. But, he came into WWE, and he may have started at the Blue. Maybe he did start as the Blue Blazer in WWE. Again, I don't remember exactly. Don't take my word for it. I'm just kind of going off the notes that I took here after watching the documentary. But either way, he came into WWE. They did their thing for a little while. He teamed with the Hart Foundation. And, he did a lot of cool different things. And, of course, the thing that he was most known for in WWE was feuding with Bret Hart. Late 93, going into 94, turning on Bret Hart. Your leg fell under your leg, or whatever the line was from the Rumble, which was a great moment, great line. So they feuded going into WrestleMania. Jim Ross, who was there, called the show, I believe. I think he came into WWE at WrestleMania 9 in 93. So he must have called WrestleMania 10. But JR says they stole the show. And Bret was not selfish. He wanted the spotlight on Owen Hart, which is why, it wasn't solely Bret's decision, but that was a big reason why Owen went over Bret at WrestleMania 10. And it led to many, even better matches after that. The SummerSlam cage match for the WWE Championship, which was wrongfully not the main event for that show. I know the whole Undertaker thing, which was completely terrible, but they had a great match on that show, and that was really when Owen came into his own. He was the king of the ring. He did a lot of cool stuff for the remainder of his run in WWE, but he had a very rigorous schedule. So they talk about the Montreal Screwjob very briefly, which they dedicated an entire episode to back in season 1, which, I enjoyed. I could see why a lot of people wouldn't like it because it's something that's been done to death over the years. But for someone like Alexis, who I watch all these episodes with, we binged the entire show together, she knew really very little about the Montreal Screwjob. So for that to get covered, and, she was very fascinated by all of that. It was covered again here for obvious reasons because it kind of put the Hart family and WWE in hot water with each other because WWE screwed over, specifically Vince, screwed over Brett, and Brett left. And I think Owen, they talked about how he got a new contract out of it, and there may have been, again, I forgot what was said, but it was kind of alluded to that Brett and Owen didn't quite get along just because Brett had left and Owen had stayed, even though I'm not sure if he wanted to get out, but his contract was coming due and he signed the new contract, and Brett may have been upset about that he stayed when he, after everything that happened. Even still, they talk about how, Jim Ross was behind the scenes, so he knows all this stuff, but he said that WWE had no idea what to do with Owen during the Attitude Era, because he was a great wrestler, but was zero personality, according to them. Very little personality. Despite the fact he came into his own, was a very good performer, they had no idea what to do with this guy. And at a certain point, he was in, what was it, the Nation of Domination at one point? They were doing a lot of random shit with Owen Hart in the late 90s before he passed away. But he always pushed back, whenever there was an angle where you would have to cheat on his wife or do something scandalous with a woman on TV, he would always say, no, I'm not doing that. He was not a big fan of all the dumb shit they were asking him to do. But he did agree to do the Blue Blazer gimmick again towards the end of his career. JR said it didn't work. He thought it was embarrassing, just a terrible use of Owen Hart when, it may have worked in the early 90s, not on the Attitude Era. He could see what they were going for, but it just didn't work. Owen Hart was criminally wasted at that stage of his career, in JR's opinion. What they wanted to do with him coming down from the rafters, which they had done multiple times, not just at Over the Edge 99, but they had done it multiple times prior to that point. What they were doing when they did that was that they were copying Sting's entrance, which makes a lot of sense, but I had never heard that before, and it makes a lot of sense now that I think about it, that they wanted to copy Sting's entrance from WCW when he would come through the rafters with the bat in hand, down to the ring. It was an amazing entrance. So that's what the mindset was behind doing that entrance with the Blue Blazer. And Owen Hart had no control over any of the stunts. It was all WWE's idea and the hooking company they had, used for it. I think the hooking company was definitely different the night of the incident, which is why what happened. But he did ask who would be rigging him, and they were told that it was the top riggers from Los Angeles, which they were far from the top riggers in Los Angeles because they absolutely sucked, which is what led to his death. And Owen never questioned it because he always kind of did what the company asked of him when it came to this type of stuff. He just kind of went along with it because he trusted that, they're the top riggers. They're going to keep me safe. Why would I question it, He was of that mindset, but they were far from it. They were absolutely terrible, and they used not the wrong clip, but a weak-looking clip that you would use for sailboats. And you would only have to put 6 pounds of pressure on it in order for it to be released. Very stupid. So they fast forward to May 22nd, 1999 for the Over the Edge pay-per-view. Owen, they talk about how, from Oge's perspective, how Owen brought Oge to the airport with him. And he told him to kind of take care of his mom, take care of his sister. And it was very weird for Oge. I mean, he didn't really think anything of it at the time. Not that Owen knew at that time he was going to die, obviously, but it was very odd because, to him, it was anything else. But the more that he thinks back on it, he thinks that Owen may have had a feeling that things may go wrong. Obviously, no one knows for sure, otherwise he wouldn't have done it. But it was one of those moments, it's wow, it's even scarier in retrospect that he kind of acted like this might be the last time I'm ever going to see him, So Jimmy Corderas was the referee for the match. And he got the finish to the match. He knew what was going on. He called it business as usual. We hear from the Godfather, who was backstage at the pay-per-view. I'm not sure if he was on that card, but he was definitely there the night of. And he remembers hanging out with Owen the night before, or the night of the pay-per-view, right beforehand. So Owen, I think, was going to practice. He was going to practice for it. Jim Ross could kind of tell that he wasn't himself, and Owen even told Jim Ross himself that he didn't like heights. He didn't really love the idea of coming down from the ceiling, but it was WWE's idea, so he did it. And JR had this really uneasy feeling at the time that he felt that he was not coming down from this thing, that things were not going to go well. He could tell something was off with Owen, with the whole stunt. He could kind of get one of those feelings that things were not going to go well. So Owen then made his way to the top of the arena, changed into his costume, and that was when the promo for the match started playing. So he waited 80 feet above the ring, which is just fucking crazy the more that you think about it. That's just insane. So JR is obviously doing commentary for the match, okay? He said that he caught Owen in his line of vision as he was coming down from the ring. I think he might have been looking down at his monitor with the promo playing, but he can kind of see, like, peripheral vision type of thing. He could see something fly down to the ring. And Corderas, who was in the ring, thought he heard screaming. And he's lucky he didn't die. That Owen could have very well fell on Jimmy. And I think there was another story. Solid Monster did a great review of this whole episode. A lot more detail than I'm providing here. I'm solely going off what I saw on this show. But he had said that someone else had told the story that there was supposed to be someone else with Owen for that stunt, like a mini wrestler. So there could have been up to 3 people dying on this show, had things been the worst case scenario, which is absolutely scary. So anyway, he said that he felt something, Corderas, that he thought he felt something brush right by his head. And he felt the ropes move when he was holding on to them. He felt them like I can't really show it, but through audio, he had his arms on the rope and they kind of went ka-chunk. Like when he had his arms on, he was like, what the hell was that, you know? Really weird stuff. And again, he was really close to dying himself. Owen was not on the other side of the ring. The fact that he could feel the breeze of Owen coming down and landing right on the mat is scary, because he could have very well fell on him had he just been a couple inches over. You never really know. It's some scary shit. So JR just remembers it sounding sick, like this thick, this really sick thud, just completely disgusting. And Corderas, a sight that he can never get out of his head, remembers seeing Owen in the ring, on the ground. And thankfully the ring wasn't shown on TV. Again, the promo was playing. When they came back from the promo, they just showed shots of the crowd, so it was never shown on TV. But you could only imagine what the people in the arena were thinking. I would love to hear from the perspective of someone that was there. I know this was over 20 years ago, but surely there was someone that was there that could speak about it. And thankfully, this was not in the age of cell phone footage, because this could have been a lot worse. This could have been caught on camera, the whole aftermath, the incident itself. It's really scary. I would love to know what people in the arena thought that night watching this and just basically just watching someone die. Not that they saw the person fall, but you know, if you're at a WWE show and even when the lights are out, you could still see things going on, people walking and people above the, like, you know, stuff like that. So I'm sure someone had to have caught it, or at least heard something, you know. I think people have come out and said, like, oh, I heard this or I heard that. No one can ever confirm that for a fact. But that's just one minor nitpick now that I'm thinking back on it, if they got someone that was there. Anyway, so they never showed the ring on TV. Godfather found out while he was at Gorilla, because I think he was in the subsequent match, that he just fell. JR needed an update. He was kind of stammering, and JR never stammers on commentary, let alone just in general. And you could tell that he was nervous. He was all shaken up over the entire thing, and rightfully so. He thought that he hit the ring post. He thought that Owen hit the ring post when he came down. And they just showed him laid out in the ring. Just, again, completely disgusting. So Lawler went backstage to get an update on what was going on. JR is there on commentary. Jerry Lawler went backstage. He told the talent that he thought that Owen died. And D'Lo remembers being backstage, seeing him wheeled out of the arena. And again, one of the worst things he has said that he has ever experienced in his entire life. Just seeing this guy get wheeled out of the arena that night. Just, so terrible. Godfather thought he looked blue, because again, he was there too. Jeff Jarrett, who was very good friends with Owen Hart, I'm not sure if, he was supposed to team with him that night or whatever, but, you know, he was cutting a promo, because they carried on the show, which, again, is disgusting. And he kept cutting a promo backstage, in tears, you know, dedicating it to Owen, blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is, they kept the fucking show going, which to me is terrible. Imagine being there and just watching a man die and then just continuing to watch professional wrestling. I don't even remember what the main event on that show was. I remember watching the show because it is on the network. They cut out all the Owen stuff, of course, but they have the show on the network. It's just, I don't know, it's just terrible. Just so terrible. But anyway, I know the whole, you know, mindset, the show must go on, not when a man dies. You know, maybe if someone gets hurt, not when a man dies. Who the fuck do you think you are? It's fucking professional wrestling. This is not life or death here. Get out of here. The show must go on, my ass. Not in this circumstance, in my opinion. So they tell the story about how Kevin Dunn, who's still around today, told JR 10 seconds before JR went public with the news that Owen had died. He told him 10 seconds before that. JR goes, I need an update, because Kevin thought he knew. So he goes, Owen's dead, and we're back in 10, 9, 8. Like, come on, dude. I know there was the story, the belief that Kevin may have already thought that JR knew by that point, but it doesn't change the fact that it came across as completely callous and gross and just what a piece of shit thing to do. So, I don't remember, I think Corderis had said, or someone that was there had believed that Owen had said, look out, before he died. Someone had heard Owen say, look out. So even as he was plummeting to his death, and he knew he was a goner, he wanted to protect other people, which is such a hero thing to do. Jim Cornette says it was unnecessary, it was foolish, it didn't need to happen. And again, I completely agree. So we hear the story from Martha's standpoint, from her perspective. She says that night she got an unknown caller, an unknown call, ended up being Vince McMahon. And she thought it was Owen, because Owen, I guess, would do impersonations, and it was actually Vince. It wasn't, she picked up thinking, oh, Owen, stop with the impersonation. Vince is like, no, it's me. It's actually Vincent Kennedy McMahon, the real Vince McMahon. I'm sure he didn't say that, but you know what I mean. So he tells her over the phone that he fell. And she's thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. What kind of injuries does he have? And he said, I don't know anything. I know no clue, I'll let you know. And then the doctor called her next. And again, she's asking the doctor what kind of injuries does he have, how soon will it be before he's better, blah, blah, blah. And then I guess he asked her if she was home alone. And she said, I think yes. I don't remember. I think the kids were home, because I remember hearing it from Oge's standpoint, who was like downstairs in the basement, like with his neighbor that day or something, because the neighbor could hear the mom screaming and crying a lot. So the kids were home. And Martha's like, anyway, she's like, just cut to the chase. What happened? And then the doctor tells her that he died after trying everything and whatever. So they're like, oh, we have Harley Race here. He accompanied him to the hospital. Do you want to speak to him? And she's like, I have no idea who the fuck that is. So she just hangs up the phone. So again, we hear from Oge's standpoint, remembering being in the basement that day, heard the neighbor say that he was with, I guess. Like, why is your mom crying so much? Like, why is she screaming? Blah, blah, blah. But all that Oge heard was, what am I going to do? Was what Martha was saying to herself, which, again, is so heartbreaking. So heartbreaking hearing that. So Martha immediately thought about the kids and the fact they wouldn't have a father anymore. She told the kids before bed that he had passed away. I guess they all slept in her bed that night. Athena, Oge, and Martha. But she did tell him that he didn't feel pain. He didn't feel pain when he passed away. He just passed away peacefully. Falling from 80. Obviously, she's not going to say, oh, he fell to his death, blah, blah, blah. But it's still so scary, So they all slept in the same bed, and Oge just remembers that he never slept, didn't get a wink of sleep that night, for obvious reasons, and that Martha didn't sleep either, and all he could hear was sniffling from his mom, just right next to him or across the bed, whatever. Man, it's just so fucking sad, just really, really sad. So Owens' body was transported to Calgary, and Martha remembers screaming so loudly after seeing the body for the first time, and Brett was there. He bear hugged her and kind of like tiptoed back over to the body, and then she kind of came to terms with, okay, his hair is the same, he smells the same, and then she wasn't afraid anymore to look at her dead husband's body. Again, just terrible stuff. And they laid him to rest soon after at a funeral, and there was over 1,000 people outside. They just packed the entire place. So many people showed up to pay their respects to Owen. And Martha did say they have audio. I'm not sure about camera footage, but they definitely play audio footage of her saying at the exact funeral that she would have her day of reckoning, meaning that justice will be served. She had no idea what happened at this point, but she knew something was up and that justice would be served eventually. So Oge remembers his mom becoming a fighter. After that, they went to the arena in Missouri and they went up on the catwalk. Now, personally, I don't know if I would bring the kids up there. If she wanted to see herself how her husband died, that's one thing. Personally, I don't know if I would do that with my kids, but, to each their own. So she wanted them to know what happened. And they did, because they were up there. And they walked over to the spot where he fell. And Oj saw it as the ultimate sacrifice that he did all this professional wrestling stuff to support his family, and it ended up costing him his life. And for Martha, it was disheartening for her to know that the last thing that he saw was falling from that height, from 80 feet up above. And that was just the scariest thing. That was the last thing that he saw before he died. And that she said that Owen was a very cautious person. You know, he would speak up about things he didn't believe in and whatever. He was very cautious, so it absolutely was not his fault. So the Kansas City police showed her the evidence, and then she shows off the clip that I talked about earlier that's used for sailboats, that all you have to do to release it is 6 pounds of pressure. That's what unleashes this thing. And they did the rehearsal, but someone else did it previously. Like, this was a totally different rigger this time. It wasn't the same people, which is probably why it didn't work. And she said that it could have been easily prevented had they just paid more money to get someone that was safer. The old one looked sloppy, and they wanted a quicker release when he got down to the ring. And if you pulled the cord, you could release it, but he never pulled the cord. So he should have been okay. So as a result of this whole thing, complete neglect on the part of the riggers in WWE, she issued a wrongful death lawsuit against Vince in Kansas City. And they wanted to move it to Connecticut. I forgot why, but that's where, that's where the company is based out of, so maybe that's where they would have a better advantage. I don't remember exactly the reason why. Vince sued her. They never explained why Vince sued her, but I believe, according to Martha on the Jericho podcast, that they sued her because if, I guess Owen wasn't fulfilling his contract because he was dead. So they were suing him out of breach of his contract, even though he died on their watch. I think that's what the story was. Again, don't quote me on that, but they mentioned that he sued her. And what's even worse was that some of the Hart family members were, they were for it and some were against it. Some just were silent and did nothing. Most of them worked actively against her. I forgot who it was. Maybe Jim Neidhart's wife, his first wife, Natalia's mom. I don't know if it was the woman on Total Divas. I'm not sure if that's who they're referring to here. I would love to know. There's just a lot of Hart family members, so I get them all confused. But she said they were not supportive of her battle against WWE, which kind of surprised me just because coming off of the Montreal Screwjob, you would think there was a lot of bad blood between WWE and the Hart family, but they knew they would be back. A lot of those guys, some of them were still there and stuff like that. So, I guess that's probably why that they didn't want to be on bad terms with WWE. And I guess maybe they didn't like Owen, or I'm sorry, not Owen, but rather Martha in the first place. Just a very weird thing, because again, you would expect them to be in their family's corner, but I'm not sure who was still there at that point, but they knew they'd be back, and they didn't want it. Like, wrestling was more important to them than family, so they actively worked against her. That did not make her battle any better. But it was an uphill legal battle, as she talked about. And Oj believes it was completely preventable because they didn't hire a better rigging team because it was more expensive. That's what he says, and I completely believe that. The settlement was for $18 million, but she didn't care about the money. She just wanted justice. But getting that settlement did provide some closure. But anyway, so they continued the show, which I mentioned earlier, which remains controversial to this day, which was so dumb. There was a dip in the ring from where he fell. The fact they continued the show, despite the fact it was a fucking crime scene, because, again, yeah, it was an accident, but who knows? Maybe it was a suicide, maybe it was a homicide. Obviously, it wasn't, but at that point in time, who the fuck knows? So why wouldn't you shut the show down? I am shocked the Kansas City police did not shut the show down. That really, really surprised me. Again, Martha even said as such, she thought the police should have stopped the show to investigate the crime scene, because that's exactly what it was. A man died on their watch in that ring, yet they continued to have the performers who were close to Owen perform in that ring for the remainder of the night. Who's to say someone else didn't get hurt or could have gotten hurt because they stepped in the dip in the ring and they broke the ring or whatever and someone else got hurt? That's just stupid. That would absolutely never happen today. It was just a different time, but it doesn't make it any better. There's no excuse for that. So JR calls it the worst moment of his entire wrestling career, and he mentioned how Owen was great at everything and how he would have had a huge career resurgence in 2000 when more people came in like Jericho. Edge and Christian were already there, and I think one of his final televised matches was with Edge and Christian. But he could have feuded with them, he could have feuded with Jericho, Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, you name it, he could have feuded with those guys. It's not like he'd still be around today wrestling. I imagine he would have retired and just kind of settled and not come back. Probably a lot like a Shawn Michaels-esque retirement, JR and Cornette do say that he should be in the Hall of Fame, but they understand why he's not, because Martha would never allow for it. Because, again, they're responsible for his death. So why would they allow the company that not killed, I think that's the wrong way of putting it, but, allowed her husband to die on their watch? Why would she allow them to benefit financially? Because the Hall of Fame is one big publicity stunt, from making the money off the show and the tickets and everything else. There's no actual Hall of Fame. If they really cared that much about it, there would be a physical Hall of Fame at this point, So anyway, Oj said that he would never let that happen, even if his mom passed away, whatever. They built a foundation in his name, which was nice. He was more than a wrestler. He was a dad. And Athena said that she has always blamed wrestling for his death, and they don't watch wrestling anymore. He could still be here if this was prevented. Oj thinks always of happy trails whenever he thinks of his father, that both kids now are college graduates. They talk about that. And, he says that I think he would be clapping and applauding me to this day. No, not Oj doesn't say that. I'm sorry, Martha says that to close it out in regards to the battle that she pursued against WWE and doing the foundation in his name. So again, a good episode. I just wish they could have gone more in detail with certain things like the lawsuit and the rigging stuff, which I wish we could have heard from the rigging people themselves, which I understand why they probably didn't, but I get it. But again, a good episode overall. My only nitpick aside from that stuff was that it should have been 2 hours. But again, good episode. Check it out right now on Vice, on Viceland, whatever. Dark Side of the Ring, the Season 2 finale, Episode 9, the final days of Owen Hart. Thank you guys, as always, for checking out the show. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Check out all the other Dark Side of the Ring reviews here on the channel, and we should be back with a Season 3 review when the season is up and running at some point down the road. Until then, guys, have a great one. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.